Hello friends, welcome to English Minds. Good morning to all of you. Where English word unlocks wisdom. Literary terms aren't just tools, they are keys to imagination, expression, and understanding. Let's not just learn literature, let's live it, share it, and spread it. English Mind, literature, har ghar. Let's begin without delay. Today's very first question: which school of criticism emphasizes close textual analysis and avoids biographical details? Option C is correct answer. New criticism. What is new criticism? Names given to recent American school of literary criticism, which bases its finding textual analysis rather than upon biographical details. Psychoanalytic criticism focuses on the psychological motives of characters and authors, especially Freudian theories, and it heavily depends on authorial intent and biographical context. New historians analyzes text with reference to historical and cultural context, reject isolation of the text from its time, and reader response theory centers the reader's interpretation and emotional response, not for text itself. And new criticism, a 20th century American critical movement that emphasized close reading, textual unity, intrinsic features like irony, tension, paradox, avoiding authorial intent and historical context. Prominent figure John Crow Ransom, Clint Brooks, W.K. Wimsett. So, and source of Wimsett and Ratcliffe, The Intentional Fallacy in 1946. Next, the term new criticism refers to a movement primarily associated with option B, American literary theorist of the 20th century. New criticism was developed by American scholars such as Alan Tate, John Crow Ransom, and Clint Brooks in the 1930 to 1950. Who? Alan Tate and John Crow Ransom, Clint Brooks. John Crow Ransom, The New Criticism, 1941. British Romantic poets, although Romanticism emphasized emotion and imagination, it's unreal to new criticism and Greek dramatist. Their work is ancient and foundational, but not related to the modern school of new criticism. Victorian novelists concerned with the realism and social issues, not with formalist textual analysis. Next, which of the following is not a key focus on of new criticism? Author's intention. New critics reject authorial intent as irrelevant to textual meaning. See the concept of intentional fallacy and the textual unity, a central concern. How are all parts of a textual contribute to its unified meaning, and irony and paradox frequently emphasized as a structuring device within a text, ambiguity seen as a richness of meaning and a product of complex literary language. Sources: the Clint Brooks, the well wrought on when 1947. Clint Brooks. Next, the new Aristotelian school emerged in the 1940s at University of Chicago. These groups of critics, including S. R. S. Crane and Elder Olson, revived Aristotle's poetics and focused on formal structure. Yale University, known for post-structuralist critics like Harold Bloom and Paul Deman, but not for neo-Aristotelianism. University of Oxford, home to classical philologists and Lincoln C.S. Lewis, but not related to Neo. Harvard, prominent for the literary scholarship, but not the center of the neo-Aristotelian theory. The Chicago critics, critics, repression REAPPRASAL, it mark scholars. When 1952. New Aristotelian criticism. School. A group of scholars at the University of Chicago during the 1940s called themselves Neo-Aristotelian. They favor a dogmatic scene which serves as a instrument against the new criticism and propounds symbolist and mystic interpretations of literature. Plot, character, genre are the central concept, while language is related to the lowly position of a more material cause or occasion of poetry. Language is to them inert like stone for the sculpture, and genre becomes a rigid scheme of definitions and expulsion. Next, the neo-Aristotelian critics primarily emphasized which of the following literary elements? Option C, plot, character, and genre. These are Aristotelian elements from poetics central to Chicago School's formal analysis and the reader's interpretations aligned with reader response criticism, not neo-Aristotelian, and the biographical context rejected by neo-Aristotelian who focused on structure and form, and symbolic imagery through discussed it was not their primary concern, more central to symbolism and imperialism. Next, which school criticized the mystical and symbolic interpretations favored by new criticism? Option B, Neo Aristotelian school. Originating from the University of Chicago in the 1940s, this school criticized the symbolic and mystical tendencies of new criticism and emphasized a classical structure, plot, character, and genre derived from Aristotle's Poetics. Russian formalism focused on literary device and form but did not actively oppose the symbolic interpretations of new criticism. And structuralism, while it analyzed deep structure of text, it did not directly critique new criticism, symbolist approach, and deconstruction, were all well known by Jacques Derrida, criticized structuralism and logocentrism, but came later and what not aimed specifically at new criticism. R.S. Crane, Anti-Symbolist Essays in the Language of Criticism, 1953. Next, New Aristotelian considered language in literature to be option C, inert like stone for the sculpture. For Neo-Aristotelians, language was a tool, not the essence, used to craft structure. It had no mystic or divine quality, but was shaped by genre, form, and logic. The ultimate meaning maker, a concept more in line with post-structuralism and deconstruction, especially Derrida, and a divine expression linked to romanticism and transcendentalism, not neo-Aristotelianism. And next, option D, spontaneous overflow of emotions by Wordsworth, romantic view, not neo-Aristotelian. Chicago critiques, Chicago critiques, interpretation of Aristotle's poetics, interpretations of Aristotle poetics. Next, Neoplatonism was founded by. What is Neoplatonism? Plotinus was founder of the Roman school of Neoplatonism. The Neoplatonists emphasized on divinity, on the divine one as the radiating source and constitutive, on the principle of all being. Neoplatonism is a philosophy of being through emanation from and return form and return to the divine one. A 3rd century philosopher who founded Neoplatonism in Rome, his work innate compiled by his student Porphyry, P or Phyry, lays its foundation. Plato, while Neoplatonism is inspired by Plato metaphysics, he was not in its founder. Socrates, known from dialogues by Plato, he did not establish Neoplatonism, and Proclus, a later Neoplatonist philosopher, 15th century, not the founder. Next, according to the Neoplatonism, all being emanates from the returns and returns to. Option C, the divine one. Central to Plotinus philosophy are transcendent, perfect, and unified principle from which all beings emanate and return through contemplation and purification. And the physical universe, a materialist or scientific view opposed to Neo-Platonic metaphysics. The demiurge, a Platonic figure, but Neoplatonism goes beyond this to posit the divine one as the absolute source. The soul, the soul is the one of emanation, not the source. Plotinus concept of emanation of innate. Next, Neoplatonism emphasized option C, the divine source as the principle of all being. The central tenet is the divine one as the source of emanation from the with soul, intellect, and material world processed. Materialism, opposite to Neo-Platonic metaphysics, metrical reality and second reality is material, reality is secondary or illusory. Rationalism, while reason is valued, Neoplatonism focuses on mystical intuition and transcendent unity and existential individuality, a concern of existentialism, not Neoplatonism, which emphasizes unity over individuality. Armstrong, A.H. 1953, and Plotinus and the Neoplatonic tradition. Next, the term novella in Italian refers to a short prose narrative. Option C. Novella, an Italian term meaning a short story and exemplified by the tales of Boccaccio di Cormoran. Decameron. An epic poem. It refers long narrative poetry like the Aeneid or the Iliad, and the poetic form. Novella is prose, not poetry. A dramatic dialogue, not a features of novella from Boccaccio. Decameron is a classic early example of the novella. Next, this is open form question. The classic example of the Italian novella is option C, Boccaccio Decameron. A foundational collection of 100 short prose. 100 short prose. Tales told over 10 days. The origin of the novella tradition. Dante Divine Comedy, epic poem, not a novella. Novella. Machiavelli, The Prince, political treatise. And Aristotle, Orlando Furioso, epic poem. Boccaccio Decameron, 1353. Boccaccio Decameron. Foundational text for Renaissance prose fiction. Next, Oedipus complex. The Oedipus complex is primarily associated with the psychology of option B, Sigmund Freud. Originated the Oedipus complex referring to unconscious sexual desire for the parent of the opposite sex as jealousy towards the same sex parent, means male mother को and female father को. According to Freudian theory, Oedipus complex, the positive libidinal feelings, not negative, positive, and feelings that a child develops forward towards to the parent of the opposite sex that when unresolved and inconceived as a source of adult personality disorder. Example are Sophocles, Oedipus, and Lawrence, Sons and Lovers. D.S. Lawrence, Sons and Lovers. Carl Jung developed the Electra complex and archetypes. Electra complex and archetypes. And Jacques Lacan reinterpreted Freud but did not originated this concept. Alfred Adler focused on the inferiority complex. Freud, the interpretation dreams. The interpretation of dreams. 1900. Next, the concept of Oedipus complex is best illustrated in which of the following works? Oedipus Rex by Sophocles and Sons and Lovers, D.S. Lawrence. Both A and C is correct answer. Psychological conflict between the protagonist Paul and his possessive relationship with his mother. Oedipus, classical myth of patricide and incest. Freud took direct inspiration from this tragedy. So, both texts are key psychoanalytic examples for Oedipal struggle. Freud, case study, and Lawrence's autobiographical influences in Sons and Lovers. Next, the Oxford movement began in 1833. What is Oxford movement? A religious movement within the Church of England. It had its origin and the main center in Oxford and ran from 1833 when it began with a sermon by Cable until 1845 when its most eloquent leader John Newman entered the Roman Catholic Church. The Oxford movement preached that the church had its independent spiritual status, was in direct descent from and medieval Catholic Church. The main object was to revive the position and the role of the Church of England and to re-emphasize the sacramental, sacramental and divine mission. It's a divine mission. Next, the Oxford movement is primarily a religious movement. When 1833 to 1845, not 4. The Oxford movement 1833 to 1845 was rooted in an Anglican church aiming to restore Catholic principles and spiritual integrity. Literary revival, although it had literary impact, its core was religious and political reformation, not directly tied to the politics. Next, The Oxford movement aimed to revive, option C, the spiritual mission of the Church of England. The movement emphasized apostolic succession, sacraments, and ritualism akin to early church practices. Catholic doctrine in Europe focused on Anglican renewal, not continental Catholicism. Greek Orthodox teaching related to the movement's aims and opposed by Oxford leader who viewed as the lacking spiritual depth. Known for Tractatism, inspired by the Tracts of the Times in 1833 to 1401. Next, who was the most eloquent leader of the Oxford movement who later converted to Catholicism? Option C, John Henry Newman. The intellectual voice of the movement converted to Roman Catholicism in 1845 later made a cardinal. Next, Newman's works include Apologia Pro Vita Sua, 1864. Next, a pamphlet is best described as a short treatise published separately, usually without hard covers. Pamphlet, any short treatise published separately, usually without hard covers. A pamphleteer is a writer of pamphlets. They are usually polemicial, written to defend or attack somebody of ideas, especially religious and political ones. In 16th century and especially towards the end of the reign of Elizabeth I, pamphleteering became a widespread literary industry by beginning of journalism. Thomas Nash and Thomas Dekker were amongst the most famous pamphleteers. In the 17th century, Milton was the most famous writer of pamphlets, and his Areopagitica is his masterpiece in 18th century. Some of Swift's finest prose was in pamphlet form, the A Modest Proposal in 1729, and Daniel Defoe was a prolific pamphleteer. 18th century, however, saw the rise of the weekly periodicals, which reduced the need of the pamphlet form of literature. Next, pamphlets are typically written to option C, defend or attack religious or political ideas. Pamphlets are brief, argumentative text, especially political or religious. Next, which two writers were among in the most famous pamphleteers during the reign of Elizabeth I? Thomas Nash and Thomas Dekker. Option B is correct answer. No. Which two writers were among the most famous pamphleteers is the next. John Milton's famous pamphlet Areopagitica is a defense of option C, freedom of the press. Used the public debate especially in Elizabethan 17th and 18th centuries. Next, Which 18th century author wrote pamphlet like a modest proposal? Option B. Jonathan Swift. His satirical pamphlet A Modest Proposal, 1729, critiqued British policy toward Ireland. Alexander Pope, satirist, and Samuel Johnson, critic and lexicographer. James Boswell, known for biography of Samuel Johnson. Next, the popularity of pamphlets declined in the 18th century due to the rise of weekly periodicals. Option C is correct answer. The growth of the periodicals like The Spectator reduced demand the pamphlets and religious sermon not a key factor in the decline. Printing restrictions existed but did not cause decline, and Gothic novels emerged later and did not impact pamphlets directly. Next, panegyric is defined as a formal composition lauding a person. Panegyrics praise and honor individuals, often delivered in speeches or writings. A formal written or oral composition lauding a person. A political satire opposite in tone to panegyric, and a dramatic soliloquy, different literary form, and a narrative lament, elegy. Next, a pantomime is a form of entertainment that involves mute gestures, often with music. Pantomime uses silent expression, typically accompanied by music, to tell a story. What is pantomime? A play or entertainment in which the actors express themselves by mute gestures, often to the accompaniment of music. Next, a parable is best described as what is parable? Imit short tale and illustrates a moral principle. Option C is correct answer. Parable teach ethical or spiritual lessons, often found a religious text. Satirical imitation is the closer to parody. Next, a parody aims primarily to ridicule the original work through imitation. Imitation of others' work, writer's work, where ridicule is the main objective. Parody humorously exaggerates the mocks the style or content of the original, imitates and honors the original. Parody often mocks rather than honors. Next, pantheism. What is pantheism? A term used to cover a variety of religious and philosophical beliefs which have in common that God is present in nature and not separable from its in the scene in which a cause is separable from its effect or a creator from his creation. Pantheism is implicit and in doctrines from Plato, in some of the new Platonics of 16th century, and in the some poetry inspired by the natural environment among English poets. The most famous example in Wordsworth is his earlier phase, 1797 to 1807. Notably, in the first two books of his 1805 versions of the Prelude. Option C is correct answer. God is present in all aspects of nature. Pantheism equates God with the universe or nature itself. Next, pantheistic elements are strongly visible in which phase of Wordsworth poetry? Option C. His earlier phase, 1797 to 1807, especially in the Prelude. Early Wordsworth expressed pantheistic ideas, seeing divinity in truth, in nature. His political poems of the French Revolution focus on politics. His later ecclesiastical sonnets more religiously and orthodox, more religiously and orthodox. His his poetic experiment with ballad, not especially pantheistic. Next, the Paston letters are a collection of what is Paston letters? And a collection of correspondence between members of the Paston family of Norfolk and others from 1422 to 1509. They are of great value of the evidence they give of a language on their time, but even more of the general historical, political, and social interest they provided. They provide. They concern three generations of the family, and most were written in the reigns of Henry VI, Edward VI, and Richard III. Henry VI. Option C. I think option C is correct answer. Yes. Henry VI, Edward IV, and Richard III. The period which includes the Civil War of the Roses, the reign of Henry VII was more peaceful, so that the letters which conclude the collection are less exciting. The collection is perhaps the finest historical record of England in the Middle Ages and as an early example of God informal English prose. Next, the Paston letters provide valuable insight into option C, social, political, and linguistic conditions of 15th century England. They are primary sources for historians and linguistics. Next, Most of the pastel letters were written during the reigns of, ये तो सबको ही पता होगा, हेनरी सिक्स, एडवर्ड फोर्थ एंड रिचर्ड थर्ड. Friends, all question is very important and very helpful for your examination. So please like now, share and subscribe to this channel for more interesting series. I hope you are serious applicants. You have pen and paper. You take notes and check your score. Please note it down. Every point are very helpful to your examination. Next, the term pathetic fallacy. Before jumping the answers, we check what is pathetic fallacy, a phrase coined by John Ruskin. यहीं से एक क्वेश्चन बन जाता है. When, ये भी एक क्वेश्चन है. 1856. And they are modern painters. Modern painters. आंसर तो अब पता ही चल गया होगा. John Ruskin. And to denote a tendency in which a writer was pathetically wrong when he ascribed human feelings to the inanimate, from the modern painter, volume 3, part 4, chapter 12. Discuss the pathetic fallacy. They rode her in across the rolling foam, the crest crawling foam, and from Coleridge, Christabel, the one red leaf, the last of its clan, that dance as often as dance it can. Ruskin introduced pathetic fallacy in his work Modern Painters to describe attributing human feelings to nature. T.S. Eliot, later modernist poet and critic, Matthew Arnold, William Blake, romantic poet. Next, pathetic fallacy refers to the literary tendency to, option C, ascribe human emotions to inanimate nature. Describing angry storms or whipping clouds. Next, of. Which of the following lines is an example for pathetic fallacy? Option A, the crawling form, Coleridge. Attributing to human quality cruel to the form of a classic pathetic fallacy. Next, a picaresque. What is picaresque? Novel typically features a, option C, rough or low-born adventurer in episodic adventures. From the Spanish picaro, rough, not work. पहला क्वेश्चन यहीं से बनता है. स्पेनिश वर्ड कौन सा है? स्पेनिश. And means picaro means Picaro means what? Rough, Rogue. The term is especially applied to a form of prose fiction originating in the Spain, where Spanish, then Spain, and deal with आप लोग जानते ही हैं in 16th century with the adventures of love. आगे देखने को मिलेगा. As used by English critics, a picaresque narrative is an episodic story in which the hero is thrown out of or has never possessed a stable position in society so that he is forced to seek his own fortune at chance and his enterprises may provide it for him. The hero is likely to suffer from social injustice or at least misfortune. This first distinctive example in English is Thomas Nash, The Unfortunate Traveller, 1594. The growth of middle class individualism in 17th century gave a new social stimulus to English picaresque. A notable example is Daniel Defoe, Moll Flanders, Fielding, Jonathan White, the Great, and Smollett's Ferdinand Count Fathom. When the novel form matured in the 19th century, the picaresque element disappeared. Through other kinds of episodic form persisted. Next. Oh, question ही आ गया. The picaresque from originated Spain. Option D is correct answer. The term comes from Spanish word picaro, meaning rogue or rascal. Next. Which of the following is regarded as the first distinctive English picturesque novel? Option B, The Unfortunate Traveller by Thomas Nash. Written in 1954. It is the earliest English example. Tom Jones and Joseph Andrews are later works. Moll Flanders is picturesque, but not first. So first, the Unfortunate Travelers. Which novel by Daniel Defoe is considered as a prime example of English picturesque narrative? Option D, Moll Flanders. It chronicles the episodic adventures of a lower class woman surviving by cunning. Robinson Crusoe is a more and castaway adventure. Roxana and Captain Singleton are related but less prototypical. Next. The picturesque tradition is in English literature began to decline during what? 19th century. Option C, the Romantic Age. The episodic roughest style of the picturesque gave way to more unified character-driven novels during Romanticism, Renaissance, Neoclassical, and Victorian periods. They are all different. Next, the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was primarily active in which artistic fields? Option C, painting and poetry. The Brotherhood included painters and poets blending visual and literary arts. a movement of painters and poets which began just before 1850. It was more important in painting than in poetry. Okay, but one of its landing members, Gigi Rossetti, was equally famous in both arts, means poetry and painting. The principal painters of the Brotherhood were Rossetti, Mills, and Holman Hunt. Its poets were Rossetti and his sisters Christina, and a little later William Morris. Next, one of the founding members of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood who excelled in both painting and poetry are a we will well-known D.G. Rossetti. Sisters of Dante Gabriel Rossetti closely linked to this movement, and Bronte, Shelley, and Browning were notable poets, but not associated with the Brotherhood. Next, which female poet was associated with the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood? Option D. Christina Rossetti. Sister of D.G. Rossetti, closely linked to the movement. Peripetia. The term peripetia refers to option B. Sudden change of fortune in a narrative. Sudden change of fortune in a play or story. Example, the downfall of Shylock in The Merchant of the Venice. A classical Greek tragedy term meaning reversal of circumstances. Catharsis is emotional release, exposition is plot introduction, reversal of audience expectations is related but not precise. Next, an example of peripetia in Shakespeare is found in option A, the trial scene in The Merchant of Venice, Shylock. The scene marks the sudden reversal of Shylock fortunes, a classical example of peripetia. Hamlet, the ghost scene is important but not peripetia. Balcony scene in Romeo and Juliet, it's romantic. Witch's prophecy, Macbeth. It is foreshadowing. Foreshadowing. Very important terminology. Next. The term Palestine in cultural criticism denotes option C. Materialistic individuals lacking cultural or intellectual interest like savage. A class of prosaic, often frigid individuals guided by material rather than intellectual or artistic values. Matthew Arnold condemned the Palestinians. Ruskin, Lewis, and Eliot had different focuses on their criticism. Next, the literary critic who used Palestine to describe the narrow-minded middle class was option C. Arnold. Matthew Arnold famously criticized the Palestine as the middle class who lacked cultural and intellectual depth. And next, negative capability by John Keats. Negative capability by Keats. It characterized a writer's immense capacity for sympathetic identification with some object dearer to him than himself. It is a quality of self-effacement which Keats finds in Shakespeare. Negative capability describing a poet's ability to embrace uncertainty without seeking rational explanation. Wordsworth, Byron, and Shelley. They are major romantic poets. Next, today's last question. Negative capability are as proposed by John Keats refers to option A, B, a poet's passive endurance of misery or mystery and doubt without any irritable reaching after the fact or reason. A poet's passive endurance of misery and doubt without any irrational reaching after the fact of reason. It does not mean moral certainty, satirical technique, or symbolic allegory specifically. So option B is correct answer. Today is that it. तो आप लोग क्या करेंगे? इसको अच्छे से नोट्स बनाएंगे और रिवाइज करेंगे. कम से कम 2 बार 3 बार तो आप लोग देख ही लेंगे. फास्ट फॉरवर्ड पर देख लीजिए एंड कोशिश करिए कि हिंदी और इंग्लिश दोनों का यूज करती हूँ, बट ज्यादातर आपको तो क्वेश्चन इंग्लिश में ही आएंगे, तो लैंग्वेज से थोड़ा फैमिलियर भी आप लोगों को तो होना ही चाहिए. सो इफ यू आर न्यू टू दिस चैनल, प्लीज सब्सक्राइब, like, share and share your thoughts. Be a active person, a scholar in your life. Thoughts in the comment section. Don't forget to press the bell icon for latest update. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to this channel. Stay tuned for more informative content and make sure to hit the bell icon to never miss any update. See you in the next video. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning. Thank you.